Hey folks, so today we have Bitrus joining us. Give you a background, Bitrus is from a finance background and he was based out of Lagos, Nigeria prior to joining Penn State. He's currently enrolled with Penn State. He's a first year student with that. Let's quickly jump on to Bitrus' journey towards it. Hey, hi Bitrus, welcome on board.
Thank you, Anurag. Hi,
Yeah.
pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, hi Bitrus. Bitrus, can you just give us the various admits you had from various schools?
Sure, happy to do that. I got into about three universities. Here, I had applied to Penn State and got in. I applied to University of Maryland and got in. I had applied to University of Rochester and also got in. So those were the three schools that I got into.
Sure, Bitrus. Can you just highlight the scholarships if you received any across those schools?
Sure. So when I got into Penn State, it was a fully funded scholarship. It was a fellowship actually. It covered my tuition and provided a monthly stipend. And then for University of Maryland, it was kind of similar to, except that that came with a teaching assistantship. So it fully waived tuition for the first year and largely for the second year. And then I had a teaching assistantship attached to it that would also help with living expenses. And then I got a 50% scholarship tuition waiver for University of Rochester. Um, that was what I remember getting for University of Rochester as well.
Sure, Bitrus. Thanks for that info. Bitrus, any specific reasons for choosing Penn State or like out of these three? Because all three are very good colleges, is what I can at least see.
Yeah. So my story is actually interesting because coming into the MBA program, I wanted to get maximum return on investment for whatever I was doing. And funding was a huge concern to me. I wanted to get into programs that I had a great chance of getting funding as much as possible. So that was very key to me. And so doing my research to schools, I saw that Penn State had those kinds of opportunities, and same with University of Rochester and same with Maryland. So that was the underlying theme across most of the schools that I applied to, just making sure that one, they were definitely top MBA programs, they were top 100 across the world. But in addition to that, also provided funding opportunities to admit, especially international students, considering that I was one. So I thought that was really important for me. And that was really the driving reason to apply to the schools that I did.
Got it, Bitrus. So obviously, Penn State becomes an obvious choice. It is obviously one of the top ranked PE schools with the kind of ROI that is there. So yeah.
Mhm.
Bitrus, now moving on to a bit away from MBA, is that while you're actually applying for these schools, one of the primary requirements of this is to secure a GMAT or a GRE score. I
Hmm.
suppose that's the similar thing for you also.
That's
So
right.
firstly, if you don't mind, what was your GMAT score and or GRE score and corresponding breakup, and how did you approach it so that it can help the future students basically prepare for those exams?
Yeah, so when it comes to GMAT or GRE, I always tell people that I'm not the best example when it comes to standardized tests because I took a very different approach to it. I was working in consulting at the time, and I'd taken already some of my leave, and I barely had enough time. So I did really what you would call a gamble. um, so I'm not the best example, and I highly won't recommend my approach to most candidates. I took a few days off and just did everything within that time. And the thing with most of these tests, there's a pattern to it. You need to practice and take some time off. And I didn't really have the luxury of that time. But what I also knew going into the whole process was that the GRE and the GMAT was just a component of your application, and I knew I would shine in other parts
Mhm.
of it. So I went into that GRE GMAT process with that mentality in mind, knowing that okay, I need to make sure that I get a decent score. But I'm not going to focus on this again, and I don't have much time anyway. So this is my only shot, and this is the requirement for it.
Mhm.
So my score, I didn't do the GMAT, I did the GRE, and it was within that 3054. It was within the 300 region, I would say.
Sure.
So again, it wasn't a spectacular score, I
Mhm.
would say, but at the same time, it was due to the circumstance of me just not taking time to study for it. So I highly recommend don't do what I did.
Sure.
But also know that it's just a component of it. And if you didn't really have a strong undergraduate degree, you didn't have a great transcript. I had a really great transcript from my undergraduate degree. I had great experience. I
Mhm.
had extracurriculars that I knew would more than make up for. And that's probably why I was able to gamble and just take a couple days to do that
Yeah.
instead of study. So I highly discourage anybody from doing what I did. Take the time out, study for the exam, especially if you know you are going to be lacking in, say, um, things like the with your undergraduate degree, you didn't do too well, or you maybe barely have enough experience. I went into the program having like 7.5 years of experience, so all those things would really help
Sure.
compared to the score, so having a score is great, but I would say don't focus too much on it, but definitely also consider that, depending also on the school. Penn State and most of those schools are ones, some of the schools that I also know just look at the holistic individual and they just don't focus on scores. So if I probably had applied to other programs, with that score, I maybe wouldn't get in. Because they just say, what's your score? And almost immediately just reject you based on that without even looking into the other requirements. So I would say don't focus too much on it, especially if you have strengths in other parts. But I highly discourage candidates from doing what I did. Definitely take out time to study. Start studying like several months, especially if you have a really busy job. Take the time out to study from, you know, after work and during the weekends, and then when it's the exam period is approaching, definitely take some quality time to study for the exam. Don't do what I did.
Sure. Got it, Bitrus. Actually, it actually helps. One thing actually will be motivating for people who will be applying. GMAT or GRE is not the sole decider of you getting into a
Yeah.
B school. But obviously, on
Mhm.
the hindsight, you should also be preparing hard for it, because getting a good score will obviously help, if not
That's true.
your chances. So yeah, got
Mhm.
that picture. So I'll step a little bit backward, Bitrus. Like you're highlighting, CMAT or GRE is not the sole component of your application. It is just a part of your application. And like
Mhm.
you're stating, you had a good undergrad score, or you had a good profile in terms of the work experience that. So how did you web your story around the SOP that you present? So maybe those 3 or 4 points that that AdCom is like, this is the guy we want in our class. So maybe if you can throw some light on.
Yeah, that was an interesting journey for me because at the time, going into the program and applying to schools, the underlying theme for me was I thought, I was going to go into supply chain. And of course, Penn State is a really good supply chain, and most of the schools have opportunities that would help you pivot into that direction. So at the time, thinking through business school and what I wanted to get, I said, hey, I want to be able to move from where my current career was headed, which was in finance, to supply chain, right? And I didn't have sufficient experience in supply chain. And so going into schools and applying into them, the underlying theme was, hey, my career is headed in finance and I'm getting an MBA to kind of pivot away from that because the long term career objective for me at the time was to be a general manager, right? Um, and if I continued where my career was headed, I would just end up, say, finance or tax manager, and that wasn't what I wanted. And so, thinking through that process and what your short-term goals and what your long-term goals are, it would really help in preparing a statement of purpose. And for me, it was my short-term and long-term goals. Ultimately, my long-term goals was to be in general management, and then MBA was a way to kind of bridge that short-term goal of learning in supply chain and acquiring that experience that would prepare me for the long-term goal of being, either in general management and eventually also, starting a business and maintaining and being in charge of inventory and all that kind of stuff that you would need the supply chain experience. So that was really the thought process for me at the time. And I think going into the MBA process, you really need to take time to think about your short-term goals and how those short-term goals lead into the long-term goals. And that was the overarching theme in most of my applications, to say, this is where I am currently in my career. My short-term goal is to be in a company that would allow me, that would expose me to, the intricacies of supply chain and what it feels like to work in that ultimate, one, be in general management, or two, eventually start my own business, having leveraged that experience that I acquired from being in those companies. So I really recommend just thinking through your short-term and your long-term goals and just weaving it into the essays, because more often than not, most MBA schools try to see how you can weave your short-term goals and your long-term goals and why you're applying to the school as a means to get that. So that was a thought process for me, and that was how I approached that process, if it helps.
Got it, Bitrus. Basically, it's about knowing yourself is what I can see. Like, why do you actually want to do an MBA and get those
Mm.
answers, and it kind of helps. But one thing is for sure, maybe on a lighter note, is that I will surely forward my resume when you start your company so that I have at least one job that I can secure.
That's right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So now moving on to the next phase, Bitrus, is like creating your SOP or LOR, like you stating the story and around it. It's just it's a thing that you have presented to the adcoms. Now is the maybe the last nail on the coffin is what I state, is that actually facing them face to face on an interview when they actually interact with you. Right now they are actually seeing you through applications and other lenses, but they will be actually meeting you. So do you have any advice for people who will be applying and what to do on the interview prep part?
Yes, I would say definitely take your time to think through why you are getting an MBA and why you're applying to that school, right? The interview process tries to understand if you know why that school is the right fit for you. And so they're interviewing people who are qualified, people who have great scores, people who have great, backgrounds and work experiences. And so the way to weed them out would be to see if they are a good fit for the school. So my advice would be, try to take time to do research on the school. Know why it's that school that you're applying to, such that, if I don't go to, XYZ school, then I'm not going to be able to achieve my short term and my long term goal. It needs to come clearly to the interviewer that you're working with. And so the only way to do that is if you take time to do your research, go into the school site, peruse it, go through it, every single tab if you can, see the things that make the schools unique, and why you're applying there and how that school can make you achieve your short-term and long-term goal, right? Talk to people, talk to professors, talk to students, talk to alums, to get their perspectives on the program and what makes it unique. Why did they go there? And those are the kinds of insights that when you're having the interview and talking to people, it comes off really strong, and they know that they see that, hey, this guy has actually taken his time to, do his research on the school and really wants to come to our school. And, they know that you're applying to several other schools, but for them, seeing that you actually know what makes the school unique, how you plan to leverage the school's resources, the faculty, the extracurricular activities like the clubs, how you want to contribute to the program, it definitely shows that you've taken the time to think about being in that school, and that's all that they need, right? And then also take your time to practice. Most of these schools have resources sometimes for the so there's usually the first interview that is pre-recorded questions, and there's a resource that allows you to practice with that, to kind of see what questions you would expect. So definitely do that, leverage that, but also at the same time, take the time to prep yourself, do the interviews, hear how you respond, see your facial expressions, your gestures, and correct anything that you think would potentially be a weakness in that interview, and let them feel your energy and let it come really strong, such that you build a great connection with the interviewer. And definitely come with great questions. Don't go into the interview without any questions. No, have really intelligent questions to ask that the person would leave with an impression saying, hey, that's a great candidate. So those are some of the things that I would recommend, going into the interview process to do as an MBA applicant.
Sure, Bitrus. That actually helps. And so those are the questions I had. If you have anything to add, basically for the folks who will be applying maybe this year or in the coming years, it will be of great help, especially for the friends from Nigeria and other parts of Africa. If you can throw some light so that it becomes easy for them to actually just go through it.
Yeah, I would say take your time to think through why you want to get an MBA, right? I have people who reach out to me all the time and say, hey, how did you get to Penn State? Why did you go to Penn State? They want to get an MBA. And sometimes I think people haven't really thought through why they want to get an MBA, right? I think it's really important to think through why you want to get an MBA. And also think through if the MBA is really the right degree for you. For example, if you're considering a career in finance, is an MBA with the concentration in finance the right degree for you, or is an MSc in finance the right degree for you? So things like that, really doing your research to understand what's the right degree for you, and if you absolutely need to get a degree is what I would say the first thing. And then just take the standardized test, right? Don't even think about it. I tell people that you're not ready to start applying until you've taken the standardized exams, so whether it's GRE or the GMAT. Definitely take your time to think through that, and definitely just apply. Write the exam. Once you take the exam, then you're ready to start your MBA journey. Because there are almost no MBA programs that wouldn't require one of the two. So I feel like once you do that, then you're officially ready to start, and not just reaching out to say, hey, how do I get in? That's fine, but definitely do that. And then I would say talk to people throughout the process. Talk to students in the program to get their perspective and see if it's a good fit for you. It's really important. This is a 2-year investment, and you might be paying some money whether you get funding or not. And you really want to get the maximum return on that investment, right? From whether it's financial or even experientially. So you want to make sure that you're maximizing the opportunity. And the only way you can do that is by talking to people and getting their perspective and a feel of the program from their lens, and talking to alums and talking to professors, especially professors that will be taking courses that you're interested in. So definitely also do that to make sure that the school is the right fit for you, because it's a huge investment. You're taking 2 years to do an MBA program. You're not going to be making money during that time. And so you want to make sure that it's worth your while, and then the last piece of advice I would leave with is apply early. If you don't apply early, you are not maximizing your chances of getting funding, right? Especially if funding is really key for you. I know funding was really important to me, so I made sure that I had applied to the first round. You have a higher chance of getting in first round, and also a higher chance of getting funding. Most schools, by the second and third round, funding has already been allocated. So if funding is really important to you, definitely apply early. But even beyond funding, also to really maximize your chances of getting in, because most schools do the applications in tranches or on a rolling basis. You want to make sure that you apply early. So I think those are the 4 things that I'll leave people here with. Know why you're getting to an MBA. Take the standardized test as soon as possible. Talk to people throughout the application process, and definitely apply early to maximize your chance of being accepted with funding.
Sure, Bitrus. I actually echo all your thoughts. and I can actually relate to a lot of them right now. So yeah, thanks for sharing your story with us, Bitrus. Thanks a ton. Hopefully you are actually so you get through good company next year, and we can get some reference from you. So
Sure. Happy to help.
sure, Bitrus. Thanks for sharing time with us. And bye,
All right. Bye.
bye, Bitrus. Thanks for watching the video, and do subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.